Hey there, it's Mike Langford. Welcome to another special episode of the Augmented Advisor Podcast, recorded live from RIA Summit 2022 in Boston, Massachusetts. As always, the Augmented Advisor Podcast is brought to you by Blue Leaf, a wealth management platform you will love. Traditional reporting, billing and invoicing, trading and rebalancing, practice management, and high engagement client experiences. To learn more, swing on over to blueleaf.com. Okay, let's get to it. On this episode of the show, John Prendergast and I are joined by Aaron Klein, co-founder and CEO of Riskalyze, for an expansive conversation about how technology is helping advisors leverage their strengths and mitigate their weaknesses. What is fantastic about this conversation is that you're going to get to hear from one of the wealth management industry's truly great innovators while he and his team are in the process of re-innovating all over again. It's super exciting stuff. Before we get rolling, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Amazon, the YouTube, so wherever you like to get your podcast jam on. And if you have a question or a suggestion for a guest or a topic for the show, feel free to reach out. Shoot us an email, podcast@blueleaf.com, or hit us up on the socials. Blue Leaf, John, myself, we're all active on LinkedIn and Twitter, and we're super easy to find. Okay, let's get to our conversation with Aaron Klein. Well, Aaron Klein, welcome to the Augmented Advisor Podcast. So wonderful to see you.
Super excited to be with you.
So excited to have you here.
Yeah,
Man.
thank you. I appreciate it.
It's really cool. It's for those in the audience who don't know, I just connected with Aaron a few days ago, and incredibly responsive for coming on the show. Now, I saw that you were going to be here, so that helped.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I don't know if most of the people who email me feel like I'm very responsive. I do answer them, but it just sometimes takes a little bit of time. But there you go.
Well, not to go too far down that path, but I think there's actually a tremendous amount of value in making yourself easily discoverable of how to talk to you, right? Because you do want inbound. You want people to come. Now, it can be overwhelming too.
True.
But you do want people being.
Well, you got to have a good team, that's for sure, if you're going to do that, if you're going to make yourself accessible. But, people laugh because I just put my email address out there, and it's the real one, and it actually comes to me. It might take me a week or two to actually get back to you with any substance, but it's ak@riskalyze.com. I love chatting with great advisors and great firms. And what is funny is my the folks, the teammates that I get to work with, have rapidly learned that they get a far faster response if I can reply back 1, 2, or 3 as opposed to something really long.
Love it. Multiple choice.
Multiple choice. They're like, oh, I can get an answer today, otherwise it might be Saturday.
And we're going to be talking about behavioral finance, but that's behavioral economics in action right there.
There you go. It's true.
That's fantastic.
It's true.
Well, listen, we want to have you on the show for a couple of reasons, and we're gonna get to one of the ones that really triggered it. It was the fact that you're doing some rebranding stuff with Riskalyze. You just recently announced that. But I thought an interesting way to kick off this show would be to kind of jump in the time machine and go back to when you founded the company.
Sure.
Because I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you tell me if I'm way off base here, but I think we're at a similar inflection point in the industry that we were in back then in 2011, 2010 range, right? Back then, the Web 2.0 thing was happening, right? People were suddenly starting to wake up to the notion that APIs were a real thing. You could pull in information, right? The industry was starting to wake up to the notion that financial advisors might like apps too. They might want to be able to have easy web apps or apps on their phone they could download and use and not have to go to a weeks-long training. I remember when I entered the industry, every piece of software that was on my computer, I had to go to a training class to learn how to use it, right? So that was a big inflection point. So it'd be fun to let's talk about that. What did you see? Am I on the right path?
No, I think that's right. The other thing is, I think that there was a fundamental shift in technology that was really happening then as well. I had done a startup that didn't really work out very well. Maybe I'm trying to think of the time frame, probably 5 years, 6 years prior.
Yeah.
And, the first $500,000 that we spent largely went to servers and infrastructure.
Oh, yeah.
And by the time we started Riskalyze, you're in a totally different position where, AWS is a thing, and you can actually rent cloud capacity by the hour instead of this massive capital expenditure for servers and things like that. And that made the process of building companies very differently, happen very differently. I think it created somewhat of the explosion of the technology is actually making some different things possible.
Right.
And you're right. There was also a design ethos. There was a how to think about usability. We really came to this, and I talked a little bit about this on stage, just now. We came to this from the standpoint of really wanting to change how this software is designed, not just for the basis of advisors. It's really great to, as an advisor, to have great software that you love to use.
Absolutely.
But we said, listen, we're going to design everything as if every time the advisor is going to swivel the monitor around and show the client something on the screen. And that's how we're gonna. That's the lens through which we're gonna design everything.
Absolutely, it sounds familiar.
Yeah, I love.
Sounds very familiar.
It sounds exactly familiar, like with what you did with Blue Leaf.
And Wealthbox, and there's a number of companies that really focused on excelling in their niche around that design and user experience. Because prior to that, I think in this industry it was seen as paint and wallpaper. And I think companies like Riskalyze have made people realize that no, in fact, by doing that, you're making the software simpler to use, less costly to train, less costly to support, and more effective.
Yep, absolutely. And in effect, we designed it to be able to use it without training. And that was, because I think it's a great point that you made. What was fascinating is that we had to learn that advisors want training anyway. And so it's and that's okay. Like, they're busy. They've got lots of stuff going on. They've got new staff members coming in. Like, they need those resources. Took us a while to go, despite the fact that we've designed this to be used without training, people still want that training and they're very hungry for it. So that led us to do everything from our Riskalyze boot camp, which turns you into a Riskalyze ninja, to all the online training that we do, one-on-one coaching that we do, and then like the full-blown Fearless Investing Summit conference that we run with 1,000 people every year. So there you go.
That's fantastic. So, fast forward to today, right? We're here at the RIA Summit 2022. This is the third one. The first two were virtual.
We're in person now, baby.
Wow. All right.
The world has changed dramatically. Just the notion, frankly, that in a decade, advisors went from being nervous about whether they could use LinkedIn, right, to they're firing up Zoom and talking to their clients all over the country from wherever they want to be. And now, the context of this summit, the venue that we're recording in, is many advisors are either breaking away and starting an RIA, going from being an employee, having a practice maybe, and now they're going to be business owners. And I say this frequently, is that, look, even relatively large RIAs are really small businesses.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's not uncommon to see, a company that's running over $1 billion of AUM, and, there's 5 employees.
Yep.
It's a tiny shop, right?
Yep. Right.
So I think this leads us into the conversation about the rebranding and some of the expansion things you're going to do, but what are you seeing at this inflection point from this audience of what their needs are and how firms like yours are going to be able to serve them?
Yeah, for sure. It is, first of all, I think it's so true that so many advisors got into this business because of their love of being a practitioner and their love of the impact that they get to make on people's lives, and they kind of became accidental business owners, and that actually wasn't their intention. It wasn't their first love.
Kind of a sly meaning of practice, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. And so, it's not the first profession for that to be true. I'm sure that's probably true of a lot of doctors. I'm sure that's probably true of a lot of different professions, but so many financial advisors got into this business for the love of the profession and then woke up one day and said, oh my gosh, I'm a business owner, And I have more people coming into my firm and I need to find a way to better serve them. And that means scaling. That means, because, if you look at the financial advisor business model, I do an interesting talk about the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the financial advisor business model. And, one of the weaknesses is like, look, the time is finite. Like, it doesn't scale. You're going to have to add people to serve clients. That is, call it an advantage the wealth fronts of the world have over financial advisors. Now, financial advisors have a distinct set of advantages over the wealth fronts of the world.
Absolutely, no question.
Right? Mm-hmm. And so our job, in the financial advice side of the equation, is to figure out how to leverage our strengths, right? And then mitigate our weaknesses. And mitigating the weakness of scale is really, I think, about leveraging great technology and leveraging how you train that staff to use the technology to, in effect, really scale up how many people we can get access to advice to.
Yeah.
And that is that. I mean, a big part of what the vision for Blue Leaf has been. A big part of what the vision for Riskalyze has been.
Absolutely, no question. And I think you have the distinction now of being the very first guest on the Augmented Advisor to ever use a SWOT analysis.
I love it. Well, it's just true. And one of the, I mean, we've got to start thinking about these businesses as businesses.
No question.
And I talked about it on stage, but I saw one study that said that if you back out the impact of market growth, the average RIA is only really growing at about 2% per year. Like that doesn't even keep up with inflation.
Absolutely.
Okay, like that's not sufficient to have a healthy business that is really out there growing its impact on the world. We need thousands and thousands of RIA firms that are acting like growth businesses,
exactly,
and are growing at 20% plus a year,
yeah.
To go out there, absent, again, divorced from market impact,
sure,
to like grow their impact 20% per year. And to do that, we need first of all, people who are being business owners on purpose, right? And we need technology that helps them scale and that they can use across their firm to drive scale. And that's a big part of why we're so passionate about driving the growth platform for financial advisory firms.
Absolutely.
Is helping them spin up the growth flywheel, create a consistent client experience across their firm. I might have 5 advisors. I don't want 5 firms that happen to share an address. I need one firm with one unifying value proposition. And then helping them ensure consistency in service by having great compliance analytics across the firm and understanding how that matches up with what they're actually promising to do.
And doing that's just enlightened self-interest for an advisor, right?
For
because
sure.
That's how they create value of the firm beyond themselves.
That's right. And that's totally right. It's funny because I do have this sense, and again, I think it comes from the love of being a practitioner and making an impact on people. There's a lot of advisors that are almost, I don't know, like shy about that or embarrassed about it. And, at the end of the day, we have to understand that growth is simply the scorecard for the impact that we're making on the world.
Absolutely.
Like that's just the truth. So I don't think any financial advisor should shy away from the idea that like I want to see my firm organically, absent market impact, grow 20% a year. That's not about just creating rich advisors. That's maximizing the impact that advisors make on the world. And if we believe that people do better with better access to advice, that's the kind of growth environment we need to create for them.
That's accomplishment of your mission. If your mission is to help people, why isn't it to help more people?
That's right. That's right.
I love the fact that you brought this whole concept of like, we're not seeing a lot of organic growth, because we had Kieran Bol from PriceMetrix by McKinsey on, and they do this study of 70,000 financial advisors. They had direct data feeds.
Wow.
And he echoed exactly what you said. Over the last decade or so, 75% of growth has just come from the market performance, right? And very few advisors are actively growing their business. Now, some of that is the curve, right? Their career, they get to a certain point, and I always joke, you get a little fat and happy. You're like, hey, I'm working 35 hours a week, playing lots of golf.
Some people want a lifestyle practice, and I think that's okay. But even those firms, I think, have got to understand that they're gonna struggle to maximize their impact and keep up with inflation and keep up with the world if they're not committed to some level of growth. And also, like, growth is what drives the value of those businesses. So if they're trying to maximize their business value protection and their ability to ensure a good future for their clients, they really need to be creating a valuable practice that they can actually have a bridge to a succession future that is going to be great for their clients. It's not just for themselves.
Right, but on the score for themselves, that values their largest retirement asset.
100%. 100%.
So if you want to do well for your family, you really got to be thinking about value, value is driven by growth.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so interesting too. Like if you are an advisor and you haven't been growing just because you got into a lifestyle business, you still do need to exercise that muscle of growth, because you don't want to get to a point where like your client pool is shrinking, right? Because of death, or we all have some level of attrition. You have to exercise that muscle. You have to have a process in place to make sure you're continuing to fill that, to have a thriving lifestyle business. Because if you talk to people in the industry, look, advisors aren't that different than other business owners, right? In the respect that, like, we do get into a comfort, a complacency, right? We get used to a certain amount of money coming in.
Right.
But then every once in a while, an economic shock event happens, like a pandemic, where AUM can shrink for a little bit. And how did that impact your business, right? Were you able to handle that well, or did it torpedo everything?
Right. Well, and if it torpedoed everything, I would argue, particularly with the pandemic crash, where it was a 33-day peak to trough, we're honestly, we need to be having better conversations with clients to understand truly how markets work and what their expectations should be. Because if we're, if that torpedoed us with the pandemic, when the market snapped right back after 60 days, that's problematic. That's problematic. We're not having the right conversations if that's the case,
again,
right?
The market did bounce back relatively strong, so that's great. The thing that I thought about it was if I were in an advisor's shoes, like I would really have been looking at my client roster in terms of like the risk dynamic, right? So we saw with the pandemic, we saw scenarios where if you were older, your risk of sickness and or complications that could lead to death were much higher. Well, if you have an average advisor who's 65 years old and their client roster is around 65 years old, you had way more risk in your client roster. So as you think about it as a business owner, thinking about risk, you think about that occasionally.
Just a bit.
There you go. That's a massive risk element for the business itself. Like being able to look across the spectrum of everything that in your business and go, how likely is this business to continue to provide the lifestyle that you want, right?
Well, and the reality is that it's, honestly, it's not that difficult. I know that that's easy for me to say, okay? But, and maybe it sounds a little bit trite, but listen, it is not that difficult to have a proactive strategy about engaging with G2 and G3, okay, the second and third generations. It is so critical that financial advisors start doing that in a more holistic way. I feel like to some extent we've almost gone like, well, I'm kind of like a lawyer, like this is my client, like I'm very focused on my client. Actually, like the reality is unlike a lawyer, legal problems don't typically follow other people. The money does.
Absolutely no
And
question.
the problems do, and the challenges do. And frankly, the best way that you can honor that client's long-term desires for the wealth that they've generated having an impact on their family is to engage with the family and create the opportunity. And that naturally creates the opportunity for you to extend your impact to them. It amazes me some advisors that just don't do that basic level of engagement. And I some of the best advisors that I know have a very distinct strategy, and they talk about it with their clients early on. They say, talk to me about your kids, talk to me about their kids, talk to me about what this looks like. And there's a level to which we've got to have your spouse at the table. I think it's something like 52% of women change advisors after their husband passes away. Okay, so I mean that's just basic blocking and tackling. And we're talking about the co-owner of the assets today.
No question.
Okay, but then we've got to have a conversation with G2. We've got to say, hey, there's a level to which it's going to be really healthy for us to have a conversation about what your plan is and how this is all going to work in the future with Generation 2. Like, how should we think about that? Driving those kinds of conversations is, as you said, really lessens the risk factor of a practice, because now all of a sudden you've opened up the spectrum of who you're actually serving.
But Aaron, don't you think that seems a bit daunting for a lot of advisors, particularly who have a traditional mindset? And you think about many of them don't really understand the opportunities that technology like Riskalyze present to engage those additional generations without effectively multiplying your client base by 2 or 3x.
I mean, it can feel daunting, but honestly, it's like fitting in a couple more cups of coffee, okay? Because I don't think it needs to be that big of a deal. One advisor I know of does this. He actually uses the Riskalyze risk questionnaire and walks talks to Gen 1, identifies how much money is probably going to pass down to this person in Gen 2, and then kind of sits down with Gen 2 and says, hypothetically, we're going to walk through this much money and understand how you relate to this much money. Let's say you've got this much money in your account. Let's talk that through. Walk through the Riskalyze process, and they've got a certain risk number for that amount of money, which, by the way, may be a difficult amount of money for them to relate to because they've never actually had it. But guess what? They're about to.
Yeah.
You know, it could be 5, 10, 15, 20 years, but they're going to have that much money, and they're going to need to learn how to react to it. So, you know, the investment of time to do a little bit of engagement with those next generations, I get that it can feel daunting. Like, start somewhere. Okay.
Absolutely.
There's probably only, you know, I don't know, a quarter of them that are willing to actually take the time to come have coffee. You have coffee with that quarter. It's going to de-risk your practice, as you said.
Yeah. So how is technology going to play a role in this future that we're talking about here, right? We're talking, we've got RIAs here looking to grow their business. Some of them are just starting their business. They're thinking about these types of things. I want to get better at growing the business. I want to make sure that I have better continuity in the business, not only in terms of like the actual operations of the business, but also in terms of the client base, as we were just talking about there. What role is technology going to play in that?
Well, you know, if we look at the role it's played so far, I mean, gosh, if you are still spending 2 or 3 hours preparing for that client review by building PowerPoint presentations or by, you know, like doing a lot of complex stuff, like at the end of the day, your technology and your data should be set up in a way that you can pop open a tool like Riskalyze and have an up-to-date view of the client's assets, have an up-to-date view of what they hold, have an up-to-date view of the analytics behind those, and be able to just take a quick look. It should take 10 minutes to prep for a client meeting, okay? Not 3 hours. Yeah. Because you pop it open and you look at it and you go, great, like we're on track, we're a little bit off track. These are the things I think I should talk to the client about. These are the things I need to get on the same page with them about.
Sure.
Maybe they've done a check-in and they've indicated that they're anxious about their financial future right now. Okay, let's add that to the agenda. Let's talk about it. This should be a 3, 4, 5 minute prep process, not a 3, 4, 5 hour prep process. And that in and of itself is a huge game changer for a time-based service business like a financial advisory firm. I think that's got to be one of the most powerful impacts.
I love that. And that's the type of stuff that the average person's not thinking about, right? Because, look, we all want to make our clients happy. So we're going to go do all this extra legwork and want to make sure. And then John walks in and it's like, that was like a 15-minute conversation. I did 3 hours of work for 15 minutes. Now I'm glad he's happy.
Right.
You're sweating and you're anxious because you
right.
get all this work done.
Sure.
That's a fantastic recommendation.
Well, and I think the pandemic has really driven some of this home.
It's a great point.
Especially, you know, to your point earlier about sort of the foundational UX point of view, user experience point of view, being able to flip the screen around.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of advisors who didn't have that really suffered during the pandemic, right? And because you had to be able to flip it around virtually, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And now that seems to be a much higher level of consciousness that people have in the industry about needing to be able to be client ready at a moment's notice.
Right. No, I think that's true. And you know, it is it is said that we did like 10 years of digital revolution in the space of 1 year during the pandemic. You know, it has made a lot of advisors into digital natives a lot faster than they thought they might need to.
Maybe not native.
Maybe not native.
Maybe they're fluent now.
Well, you know, but it's just like forced everybody to kind of like figure that out. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's not going back. No. I talked to one advisor the other day, and he said, you know, I have gone from 80% of my clients wanting the in-person meeting to 20% of my clients wanting the in-person meeting. Okay, so that's not going to change, and we just have to. Advisors are really good at adapting. They've always done it before. This is a moment of adaptation to say, time to embrace the new normal. Yeah. Like, time to understand that this is how it's going to be in the future. So how do I leverage technology to say, wait a minute, there are some real benefits here. I can increase the impact of my advice because I'm not, you know, if I've got a particular niche that I'm serving, I've just removed geography as a limiter on that niche.
Absolutely.
That's a really, really interesting perspective. And I know so many advisors now who have themselves decided to move. And now, as their businesses are shifting, they're approaching 30% of their clients in the new location they moved to, and 70% of their clients in the location they moved from. And those clients are perfectly happy. They fly back every couple of months and see the few that want to actually meet in person. But those clients are perfectly happy to connect over Zoom because it's the new way of connecting.
100%. If I don't have to get in my car and come to your office or prepare my house for your arrival because you're going to do a dinner table conversation with me, I'd much prefer, let's fire up Zoom, let's get this thing done here. Yeah. And then like you said earlier, like, you can present things easier on a screen. We're all getting used to that. Like, you think about how awkward it was showing somebody who was 70 years old information on a computer
Yep.
or your phone 10 years ago.
Yep.
But now it's like they're pinching and zooming and
totally.
It's complete. The adoption rate, as you said, skyrocketed more recently. But
Well, and the threshold for in-person has just gone up in this world. So it's not that you don't want to hold in-person events with clients. In fact, those are probably more valuable than ever because people actually are really craving the connection. Okay. But you're going to be thinking less about that in-person thing being a client review in your office for 30 minutes or 40 minutes, and you're going to be thinking more about what kind of event can I hold that'll be, a lot of fun for my clients to connect with me and their fellow clients and my firm. That's again, for some advisors, that's a challenge. That's a mental challenge. For others, hey, life just got a little bit more fun. I can knock out like the day-to-day part of my job with a lot more flexibility. And then focus on how I'm helping those clients see the impact of my work, in a bigger way.
I love that. I love that you just echoed so much of the advice that we are routinely hearing from guests on this show. So this is why they come from the tech side. Most of them are on the wealth management side. So this has been fantastic, Aaron. I'm sure people are going to want to follow up and learn more about Riskalyze. So Riskalyze.com for the time being.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and to be clear, like our product is going to continue to be named Riskalyze. We just realized that, in fact, it was funny. I was sitting down with an advisor about a week ago. And he said, I was a client of yours back in 2014, and we used it for like 6 months, and we had a bunch of things going on. And I've always said to myself, I should get a better risk tolerance questionnaire, Yeah. And he goes, so tell me, why are you rebranding? And I said, well, because everybody thinks we're a risk tolerance questionnaire, and so there you go. Like we've spent a decade building and innovating really the growth platform for financial advisors and wealth management firms. And so we just recognize that, a company name change is going to help people kind of reset that bit in their heads and say, got it, like this company has grown beyond what maybe I knew it for back in 2013 or 2014. And so the product will continue to be known as Riskalyze. We're still going to be the fearless investing company. Everything that we believe about the world will continue to be true, and our mission and vision is not changing. But we're excited. We think our company name is going to tell a broader story for the future sometime early next year.
I love it. There should be some sort of like lottery for who can pick the right name. Like you put a whole bunch of names up there and say, hey, you win a prize.
We've thought about it. Yeah, we went and we hired this firm that is renowned and a fascinating firm. They're the ones who keep you from picking a name that like means something really negative in a different culture or language. And also just like help. I mean, they invented some amazing brands. This firm is responsible for Intel's Pentium, for Apple's PowerBook, for the Swiffer, for Febreze, for Sonos.
Very cool.
Which I was always intrigued by that. I'm a longtime Sonos customer, and it's like sound plus operating system. Like that's how it came together. I'm like, I always wondered, and that is indeed what it meant.
It's a great little story too.
It is. Yeah. And so, so anyway, we're working with that firm, and so we're in the early stages, but we'll figure out what the name is and kind of unveil that early next year.
I think it takes a little bit of corporate courage to change a name that you've had for a long time that's been so successful.
Yeah.
But I think it's also really reflective of what insiders in the industry have known about the power of Riskalyze.
So interesting.
Why it's gotten so big so fast.
Yep.
The benefits people were getting beyond, risk tolerance, risk evaluation, and how people were really using it as a growth tool. So I think it's fascinating to sort of change that brand to recognize the real ways people are getting leverage from the product.
Yeah, I'm glad that we are doing it as a trailing indicator of that and not just as a leading indicator of that, right? Because I think it might be a little bit tougher for people to see and understand. But I think you're right. I think we have become known for that by our customers that we serve and by the firms that we serve. And so, I'm excited because I think it just continues to open up. When I look at it, yes, sure, you look at the market share surveys, and of the advisors who've chosen a risk solution, for example, we're like 87% of the market. Okay, great. How many advisors have chosen a risk solution? If you boil the ocean that way, we're at like 9% market share. We've got a big blue ocean ahead of us. And so, broadening that out and helping people see the growth platform aspect of it, I think is really exciting and powers us for the next decade.
So exciting. It's going to be a fun decade to
Thank
observe.
you. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming
Absolutely.
on.
right.
Anytime. You're welcome back. Anytime.
Anytime.
Thanks, buddy.
Great.
Thank you very much for listening to and or watching this special episode of the Augmented Advisor podcast. It was fantastic to have you with us. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. Huge thanks to Aaron Klein from Riskalyze as well for joining us. It was so much fun nerding out about the evolution of the industry and the promise of the future with Aaron and John. So amazing to see two guys who kind of started their businesses right around the same time and watching them grow and then hearing them think about where we're going from here. It's awesome, awesome stuff. Okay, as I mentioned at the top of the show, please do make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and do us a favor. Make sure you give the Blue Leaf page a follow on LinkedIn and share this episode. Chances are, if you like this episode of the podcast, someone in your network will like it as well, okay? All right, that's all I have for you today. Please make sure you're staying safe and be nice to each other. We'll see you next time on the Augmented Advisor podcast. See ya. Bye.